Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Deconversion Stories. And today I have the absolute pleasure of talking with the one and only Mandisa Thomas. You guys know her. She is the founder of Black Nonbelievers. And today we are going to hear her deconversion story. And we're also going to talk about how the whole Black Nonbelievers thing got started and what was involved with that. So, Mandisa, first of all, thank you very much for joining me today and welcome to the show.
Hi, Neil. Thank you for having me. It is an absolute pleasure.
Well, that remains to be seen, I guess. But yeah, usually we have a good time here. So why don't we kind of go back to the days when you were a believer and sort of, how you ended up getting indoctrinated, probably born into it, I'm assuming, and how you found your way out as the dominoes started falling and you just finally went, you know what, this is garbage and I'm out of here.
Actually, my story is a bit different because I
Oh,
wasn't formally raised, I wasn't formally indoctrinated into religious belief.
okay,
So
okay.
I am, yeah, my story is a bit different. I was indoctrinated, but I'm going to explain how in a little bit. So I'm a New York City native, born and raised.
Nice.
And I'm 44 years old. I was born in 1976, and you look like you're old enough to remember the 70s.
I would have
Not,
been 10 in
that is
76. So,
the yeah. So that was a very pivotal time. You're just coming out of the hippie 60s, and
yeah,
sort of like the disco
well,
70s, but it
some
was
of us.
still, yeah. The 70s was a very, very uh it's a pivotal time in the Black community. In particular, there were a lot of Black parents who were identifying more with Afrocentricity and
Mhm.
wanting to do away with that standard Eurocentric culture. And so at that time, my parents, along with others, decided that they wanted to name their children African names. As a way to identify more with Black consciousness
Okay.
and being empowered within the Black community. And so I was born in that time period, and my mother made a conscious decision that she wasn't going to raise my brothers and I in the church. Now,
Oh,
my maternal grandparents, my maternal grandmother and my grandfather, they were pretty non-religious as well. I remember many family gatherings with no religion at all.
mhm.
My grandmother would make these very, very big, elaborate meals for the holidays, and we would all get together. There was no call to prayer. Like no
Okay.
one had to get together and start praying. People kind of did that on their own. And so that was one of my earliest secular influences, was my maternal grandmother in particular. Now, my
Okay.
dad's mom, different story. Very, very religious, very, very Christian.
Okay.
But I didn't have to, I wasn't made to go to church unless I wanted to. So my upbringing was very, very rooted in the Black conscious community, or it was also called the Black nationalist community. So
Sure.
I went to a cultural center growing up. We went to a lot of different programs, learned a lot about Black history growing up, also learned a lot about racism and institutional injustices growing up. But where the indoctrination comes in with being raised in that community is there's still a level of patriarchy that comes along with coming out of religious belief. It's to be, if you
Sure.
remember that time, the Nation of Islam was also quite popular.
Mhm.
And so, there were folks in the Black community who were coming out of that traditional Christianity. And so they were finding other religions or other things to kind of belong to. And so that was sort of my background. But also too, I started training as a singer at the age of 4 years old.
Awesome.
And so my mother, I was taking voice lessons with my voice teacher, vocal coach, and I was singing various churches around
Oh,
the New
wow.
York City area. So yeah, I would sing it. I would be a guest soloist in many churches. And I remember thinking that, the teachings were rather strange. That
Yeah.
especially the Trinity concept of God, the Christian God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the idea that God is a loving God, but a jealous God at the same time. So,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff was just really, really weird. And so, it always kind of creeped me out a bit. And like I said, I had my dad's mom was a devout churchgoer, and there were times where I remember I would remember going when my mother said I could always go to church with her if I wanted to. So I was given that choice.
Okay.
I wasn't given the choice though to not I wasn't given the choice to sing if I wanted, so I had to go. I had to go to voice lessons, and I
Mm.
also had to sing in these churches as a soloist at my mother's as a part of that training. But also too, I was still attending a lot of the culture center programs
Mhm.
and a lot of the educational programs. My brothers and I were always in the library as well. But what that came with was a sense of, and when you start learning about that, when you start learning about Black history and culture, as well as the systemic and institutional racism, it really, really makes you feel a way about white people. It really,
Oh
it
yeah, no
really
doubt.
does.
No
And
doubt.
so my indoctrination really, really was heavily against white culture and Eurocentric culture, even though I still interacted, with white people.
Mhm.
In my elementary school, I went to a predominantly white elementary school in Queens for 2 years. Then I transferred to my neighborhood elementary school, which was in the hood. I'm born and raised in New York City housing projects.
Mhm.
Never ashamed of that. But so there was a heavy, heavy leaning towards that. And as I was saying before, there was definitely a sense of patriarchy, and this also the spirituality that I was raised around and indoctrinated into. And so I remember the first time I was asked if I was an atheist was in my freshman year of high school. I had been accepted into the High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, LaGuardia High
Oh,
School.
nice.
So I was so outspoken, I was so militant, and more than I probably should have
You're
been.
kidding.
Right, right. Me outspoken.
I've seen you around before. I don't believe that. Go ahead.
So yeah, I was very, very outspoken at that age, and I remember one of my classmates asking me if I was an atheist, and I asked what that meant, and I was told
Oh, you'd
that
never heard the word
it
before?
mean not at that time, no.
Okay. Okay.
But I asked what it meant, and I was told that I didn't believe in heaven or hell. And when I thought about it, I said, "Well, that sounds about right." Because I remember at night, I would lay awake at night wondering about the concept about death, what happens when we die, and do we go to a heaven, do we go to a hell, or anything like that. But the one thing I could never ever reconcile this idea of going to heaven or hell when there was absolutely no proof of an afterlife.
Right.
I could never ever reconcile that. And so I remember for a time I would think to myself, well, there's I'll just be a good person, and I'll go to heaven and I won't worry about it. But I still couldn't stop thinking about it. So for me it was just pretty, it was pretty intense. It was very, very intense for me. And so and there was also a heavy, a heavy indoctrination into believing in spirits, the spirits of our ancestors,
Like
some
ghosts
sort
kind of
of
thing?
sort of like ghosts,
Yeah.
that the that our African ancestors walked among us and that they were guiding us. So similar to religious belief. And actually, if you I know there are a lot of religious people who still do believe in ghosts as well. So
Yeah.
it was
Sure.
more like spirits, more like like the ancestors were still walking among us and that they were guiding us and such. So for a while, I reconciled myself to being spiritual but not religious. I never really got into Christianity, even from my limited exposure. It just didn't seem like anything I wanted to belong to. The experience, the exposure that I had with Islam as well, just didn't really sit with me as well. And I grew up with a lot of Muslims. A lot of my classmates were came from Muslim households as well.
Was there like
So
an upswing of becoming Muslim at the time, or?
probably like after the 60s, in the 60s and 70s, I would say there was, because
Right.
there were a lot of people in New York who had joined the Nation of Islam.
Okay. Okay.
And some of them broke off and into another sect called the Five Percenters. If you're
Mm,
familiar with the Hebrew Israelites, it's
of
kind of
course.
sort of similar to that. So, yeah, I remember all of that stuff growing up. It was just a very, very interesting time to be, a kid, like in the late 70s, early 80s, and remembering all that stuff. And so
Right.
I would say that it was there was a portion of the Black community who had broken away from traditional Christianity, but still so many others were still Christian as well, including a lot of my cousins,
Mhm.
especially on my father's side of the family. So I certainly had my experiences with them, and so.
Did they ever try to convince you to become a believer?
I remember having an argument with one of my cousins.
Mhm.
We were the same age, 13, 14.
Mhm.
And, she was trying to explain to me the concept of original sin and how we're all born in sin. And
Right.
I
Right.
remember arguing. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "Babies are born knowing nothing. How in the world is anyone born in sin?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm coming from a place of logic that makes absolutely no sense. And she's trying to explain the concept of that concept, and I just thought, wait a minute, because by that time at that time in our junior high school, we were shown the video The Miracle of Life, how conception occurs, and childbirth. There was nothing religious about that. It was all science based.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
So
Yeah. If
I just
everything's predetermined, how come there's so many sperm?
right, exactly, right? So, and so it was just very, and I have to I'll give my mother credit for trying to address the teenage pregnancy problem
Mhm.
within especially the Black community at that time. She used to be the PTA president at my elementary school, and so
Okay.
this was something that she felt people needed to
Important.
see. It
Yeah.
was very important to try and at least to try to prevent some the
Sure.
kids from making the same mistake. And so
Sure. Sure.
there were a lot of there was I was raised with this sense of awareness
Mhm.
that that most adults don't even get. So it made me it made me very, very mature before my time. And so there was a lot of information, a lot of just education that was placed in our household. And I was raised in a single parent household. My parents split when I was young.
Mhm.
And so but that didn't stop my mother from putting my brothers and I into educational programs, and just making sure that we had this sense of awareness about us.
She sounds amazing.
Well, yes and no, but but yes, I definitely take, I give a lot of credit for that,
Mhm.
for that upbringing. And like I said, I wasn't indoctrinated into, religion, or I wasn't forced to go to church in the way, in the sense that I had to become a believer and that I had to follow the Bible in any way.
Right.
But as I got older and as I moved with my now husband and our daughter to the Atlanta area, and I remember I had never been asked, "What church do you go to?" before. Never, ever.
In Atlanta, nobody asked
In the
you?
South. They did. And I had
Oh,
never been
oh,
asked
oh.
that in New York. Never,
Gotcha.
ever.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a very, very weird experience. And so over the years, because my husband's a non-believer as well. So over the years, we would just, we kind of built up our networks. But I just remember never wanting to really belong to a church. I attended one church service. It was very friendly.
Mhm.
But it was just still never, I just never ever wanted to belong to a church like full time. And
Right.
so over the years, as our family grew, uh, we started thinking about our networking connections and realizing that while we wanted our children to have friends, we didn't want to belong to any church communities. And I had the opportunity to hear Jeremiah Kamara, who is the producer of the documentary Contradiction and Holy Hierarchy. I had the opportunity to hear him on the radio on Michael Bazin's show, and where the episode was called "Pimps in the Pulpit," and I was like, yes, that speaks to me because
Pimps
I
in a
grew up
pulpit.
not real, yes, pimps in the pulpit,
Oh,
talking about
jeez.
some of these pastors in the churches and what they do to their congregations,
Oh,
and
okay, good.
and what he said really made sense about the church and the Black community. And so a few years after that, that was in 2006, 2007.
Mhm.
So in 2010, I had the opportunity to attend a book signing in the Atlanta area where he was signing books. And so I just became really inspired by that. I had also by that time watched Religulous by Bill Maher. And I really, really started to reassess my identity because I had done away with the whole atheist thing or the atheist identity, but I just knew that I wasn't religious.
Yeah.
And so from there, I actually was connected to a Black atheist group on Facebook, and I thought, wow, I said, you mean to tell me that there was a bunch of, because it had never really occurred to me that there were Black folks who could be atheists because even though I wasn't formally religious, religion, it's so prevalent within the community that I just really never thought that there was that option or that there were others who like formally identified. And so after meeting more folks and after becoming reacquainted with American Atheists as an organization, I had heard of Madeline Murray O'Hare. I watched the Forensic Files episode on her, and learning about her tragic death and the death of her family. And so in 2010, I just re-identified as an atheist. That was my personal journey of, and I remember having to reconcile, that feeling of, well, what if I'm wrong? What if there is a God out there? And what if something happens if he, she, or it
The
is not
Pascal
happy
wager
with
thing.
my, yeah.
Yeah.
So uh, but I had to overcome, some hesitation on that and a sense of fear. But after a while, and especially after, really examining what it meant to be an atheist and what that entailed, and I was just like, well, yeah, that's pretty much me. So in wanting to find more of a community and wanting to connect with more Black atheists in person, there was an event that I was told about, but I couldn't find any information on it. So I attended a meetup group in the Atlanta area. I was advised to look on Meetup's website to find other groups.
Mhm.
And at that time, I had also had some conversations with some Black atheists online who shared their experiences with attending many of these in person atheist meetups and what it was like for Black folks to be there and other people of color, how, they are often one of the only ones in the room, and also how they're treated, how either they're othered or smothered. And I just kind of came up with that phrase because that's exactly the way to describe it.
Right. Right.
Uh,
I
so
like it.
you have other, you have all the white people. I've never met a black atheist before. They want to know all about the black experience from either the one black person there. So and they're so excited to have other people that sometimes it becomes overwhelming. So
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
and so I I went in with, being very optimistic and thinking, hey, we're all we're all atheists here, maybe we'll be able to, find some common ground. And we did, but I did have the folks who said I've never met a black atheist before, and so the night did get a little weird as it went on,
I bet.
because there were some inappropriate things said, and we're just like, okay, so
Oh
there
boy.
was another, yeah, so there was another black guy who was there, and during the comment, it got a little heated because there were some folks who didn't understand what the difference was between the other atheists there and the black atheists, with the experiences. And so
Mhm.
once the meetup ended, he and I had a conversation, and I said, there has to be more of us out here. There's no way that we are, in the Atlanta area and we're the only two, because I had started connecting with folks online. So I knew that there were other black atheists out there. And this was actually on, around the same time that the late Bishop Eddie Long had come under fire for the scandals in his church, where he was carrying on, relations with young men in his church. So, there were people who were speaking up about that, and, definitely speaking out. And so, I thought about what it meant to start a group specifically to help bring out more black atheists on the ground.
Mhm.
Because, and I was nervous about it because this was something that in the Atlanta area really hadn't been done before. So, and at that time, I had connected with Black Atheists of America, which was an existing entity at the time,
Mhm.
African Americans for Humanism. And so we thought, well, we should start something here in the Atlanta area for Black folks who are looking for other like-minded individuals and who might be having a hard time.
Mhm.
And so it was after that meetup in January of 2011 that the entity, which started out as Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta, was created. And it really was, the concept was to build an in-person community, not necessarily church, because the guy who I spoke with was a former pastor. But since I hadn't come from that world, I thought it would be a good idea to incorporate what my experience with with the black community, and to
Mhm.
do something different than what the other groups were doing at the time. So incorporating a lot of our values and also what we like as people.
Mhm.
And so we just started from there. And in February of 2011, we had our first meeting, and there were about 15 people who showed up. So
Your
we
first
were like,
meeting, that's
wow.
not bad.
Yeah, yeah. There were 15 of us who showed up. We had a full program, poetry reading, singing, we have food, and just a discussion. And so,
You
it
had me
was
at
a
food.
yes, yes. Yes, we had food at the meeting. And so, from there, that is how Black Nonbelievers got started. It really was created out of what was lacking here in the Atlanta area, and what we could build on, trying to definitely bringing more folks together, trying to eliminate this, that whole I never met a black atheist before, or I
Mhm.
thought I was the only one out there, and to actually do it in real time where people can actually sit and congregate together, socialize, network, and support each other. So
Mhm.
that is where we really got started as an organization. And it really did stem from my background as pretty much being secular, but having been heavily exposed to the religious community, my discontent with that community as well. And also, just trying to build up a new network that was needed.
Mhm. So there was nothing, like they didn't have any sort of organization in Alabama at the time.
Well, in Atlanta,
Or sorry, Atlanta. Yeah,
there
thank you.
were other secular groups. You have the Atlanta Free Thought Society, you had Fellowship of Reason. So there were other atheist groups here. There still are, but none of them, there were either very few Black folks that attended or it was very sporadic. So there was no concentrated Black atheist or secular organization here
Okay.
in the area. And so and what we also set out to do was to connect with these other organizations to try to build up a coalition, because we
Sure.
realized that that was going to be important, that if we were going to be a part of this community, that we really needed to network with the other groups, the other area groups. And also, we found that many of these groups really weren't working together. You had
Mhm.
one building that had three different groups that met in it, but they had never done anything together. And we thought, wow, what a shame. So the
Mhm.
outreach efforts in the area was also pretty lacking. And so there were people who had their specific group that they went to. If you happen to find them, great, but there was very little outreach as far as actually getting like getting out, and engaging folks, not to proselytize and try to turn people, but to actually say, hey, we are here and we are making our voices heard. And that was also another important component to the organization, was encouraging people to be open with their non-belief if
Mhm.
possible. Not that it was a requirement.
Right. It could be dangerous for some folks to do that.
Absolutely. But for those of us who could, and for those of us who dared to, because I was still working full time. I have my family. And so I didn't really know what that would lead to, but I just knew it was something I had to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, in taking that leap, not a leap of faith, but of course, I wasn't sure where it was going to go. But, the end result was that it was indeed needed. And so we just started picking up and continuing, our programming and connecting with other entities. We were able to find a connection with one of the local radio stations here. And so
Nice.
we ended up, being a part of an hour-long segment that focused on everything atheism related. And so from there, we just continued to build.
When did you guys become a 501c3?
We officially became a 501(c)(3) in 2014. So as we grew and as we connected with other folks, there was interest in starting similar groups in different cities. And so the team and I at the time decided to strategize on expanding the group from Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta to just Black Nonbelievers, so that we could help affiliate groups get started and we can just start branding and expanding. And so we officially became a Georgia nonprofit in 2011. But yes, in 2014 is when we officially became a 501(c)(3) organization as Black Nonbelievers.
Awesome. And how many, I guess, offices or whatever, what's the word I'm looking for?
Affiliates.
Yeah, yes, that's a much better word. How many do you have across the US right now?
Well, right now on our website, there's about 12 of them. We're going to be going through a restructure because due to COVID and due
Mm.
to what other organizations go through with people coming in and out,
Mhm.
we're going to have to, we're doing some restructuring. But right now we have about 5 good active affiliates. Of course, in the Atlanta area,
Mhm.
our Charlotte, North Carolina group, Washington, D.C., my hometown of New York, New York City, and also in Detroit, Michigan. Those are our active affiliates. We've had some that have come and gone over the years, and we always hope that people will continue to step up. But yes, in that time, we right now we have 5 very, very strong affiliate groups across the country.
Amazing. That's good. And so when you say that they come and go, did it just not take wherever they were trying to set up, or?
Well, for people, life happens. Like, for example, to the person who helped start the local Atlanta Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta.
Mhm.
I mean, he himself said he's a starter, not a manager. So, you have people who are excited to get involved for a little while, but then sometimes life may happen for them. They may
Sure.
get a new job, something happens with family, or their interests start to wane. And
Mm.
we always try to keep it interesting and engaging for our organizers and members, because I don't ever like to try to tell people, like, look, this is a crusade. We're on a crusade for free thought and such, even though I would love to say that. But it is something
Technically.
important, right? Yes, it is something that is important and it is needed, because I can't tell you how many people who have come to us and who thought they were the only ones out there,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
and they were so glad to see us. And within the Black community in particular, we are climbing still a very uphill battle.
Mhm.
Not sure if you're familiar with the new Pew Research study that was just released.
Just heard about it, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so while now there's 21% of the non-religious or unaffiliated,
Unaffiliated.
religiously
Yeah.
unaffiliated, the numbers of the openly identified, like, Black atheists and agnostics, are still extremely low.
Mhm.
And there's still, a huge presence, an overwhelming presence of religion within the Black community. And so, that is still, pretty that's still pretty challenging to deal with, although now the diversity of the community is becoming more widely acknowledged and
Great.
recognized. We also realize that there is still an education about the community that is missed. For
Mhm.
example, the historical presence of Black freethinkers, humanists, and atheists, the fact
Mhm.
that there are now more of us out here, speaking up and forming communities, especially for those who have left religion behind or who are questioning.
Mhm.
So, this is a very, very pivotal time, this is a very important moment for us, because in the 10 years that we've existed, we've definitely, I can honestly say that we've definitely helped expand, and amplified and increased the number of openly identified Black atheists out there.
Right.
And so, and also in that work, we have encountered, we've encountered various entities and people who wanted to interview us. And
Mhm.
so this actually started back in 2011. There was a graduate student who was doing a short film, and she wanted to interview a few of us on camera. Now, when we first got started, that process, people were almost like they were really, really scared to speak on
Scared?
camera. Yeah, they were not just well, they were definitely scared, because
Wow.
they didn't know how it was going to come across to the general public, to their families. Some of them had jobs that they were working, within religious companies. So they weren't sure how that was going to play out.
Mm.
But it turned out that there were more people who were like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you're here," rather than the other thing. So,
That's
not that we
awesome.
haven't experienced that, but
Of course.
yes, we definitely had that. We definitely encountered more folks who were like, "Wow, I thought I was the only one. I'm so glad you're I'm so glad you exist."
That must be a great feeling when you hear something like that too.
It really is, and not because it's personally gratifying. It is knowing that people who needed that support and who need that validation are getting it.
Yeah,
And that's what community is all about,
absolutely.
helping people to overcome that sense of isolation, that fear and, whatever hurt and pain that they were dealing with as a result
Mhm.
of, leaving those communities behind and feeling like they had no one.
Mhm.
So that to me is really what led me to dedicate my life to this. And I remember what it was like for me to feel that liberation, to
Mhm.
feel that sense of, oh my gosh, this is a breath of fresh air. I no longer have to sit with that fear. I no longer have to sit with, that I can continue to broaden my perspective and my horizons as a result. So,
Mhm.
and to help people get to that place was, is really what makes this what makes this work.
And worth doing,
Yes.
right? I mean, I tell you for sure. I can't tell you how many folks I've had on here who've had stories about the pain and the not knowing that there are others out there until they, because of the internet. I think the internet has done wonders for what we try to do
Yes.
because people stumble on things. Oh, wow, wow, they think the same as I do. That's wow, and then they find more and more, and they get hooked up with the community. And sure, I mean, let's face it, the atheist community is pretty splintered. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing we really have in common, as you know, is we just don't believe the claims of deity. So everything else is a crapshoot. So
It's interesting because many of us tend to fall along progressive lines, right? Many of us
yes,
are
yeah,
very much, very much for like reproductive justice,
yep,
LGBTQ rights.
bodily
Now, there
autonomy.
has been, yes, bodily autonomy, expression, liberation.
Hmm.
Now, when it comes to matters of racial justice,
Hmm.
that has been a learning process for a lot of people in this community because
Hmm.
there were so many who thought, well, why does there have to be a group called Black Nonbelievers? We're all atheists, why do you have to have a separate group? And I was surprised when I first heard that because I thought, wow, well, it makes if you are a person of color or definitely black in this movement and you see the lack thereof, it makes sense to you.
Yeah,
and
it sure does.
yeah, and also there were questions about, well, how can the community be more diverse and more inclusive? How can we attract more black folks, more other people of color, more women and such? So this had been a question for a number of years. And if you look at the representation and saw that it was lacking, then you understand why there is a need for a group, an organization, specifically targeting Black folks, and
Hmm.
definitely or young folks, or women, and other demographics. So,
Sure,
but yes, in a ways that what we're finding is that there are atheists who don't necessarily hold the same values
right.
that others do. There are some who
Don't you
could
tell
care
me.
less. Yes, there are some who could care less about helping other people.
Right.
They're just as Christian as some of these Christians.
Yeah, or at
So,
least
or
behave
some of these
that way.
believers.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so this speaks to the number of people who they may have left religion, but religion hasn't left them.
Hmm.
And I think that's a very interesting, aspect to our community because we don't necessarily have to agree on everything,
No, of course not.
but when it comes to respecting, respecting each other, and
Hmm.
at least definitely trying to support each other because, once someone leaves once they leave their religious communities behind, support is needed. And that is
Hmm.
where I found that there is a huge focus for me is really trying to help people come back and heal themselves and get back to that place where they feel like they can move forward and not
Right.
be ashamed of their identity
Exactly.
as atheists.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that organizations like yours and others help very much in doing that because they first of all, people get introduced to so many more that think the same way like them about atheism and stuff like that. So they do realize that they've got people there with them, so they're not really alone. They don't have to face all of this alone either, because
Yes.
there's always a support network there. So how does somebody, if they wanted to, how would somebody start up a branch of Black Nonbelievers?
So, well, first we have to put them through a hazing process. That's what we're like a fraternity. No, but right now there is a
Battle
more
boards, or-
yes. So what we're doing now is there's a bit of a moratorium on new affiliates
Okay.
until we restructure. But the process would be that they can contact us through our website. And there's going to now be a more stricter vetting process,
Okay.
and it depends on
Yeah.
where you are, because one of the things that we try to avoid doing is duplicating what other cities and what other organizations and groups are doing. But we always encourage people to find their local groups, because even in your small cities, there's at least one secular group.
Oh yeah,
There's at least one. And so
Meetup is great for that.
it is. Yeah, it is great for helping you find groups in your area. And so we always encourage folks to, at least connect with their local communities before before you start a being group, and also we want to make sure that there's definitely a need for it. Of course, in your major cities where there are a lot of Black folks, you're going to find other Black atheists there. So there probably is, a need for it. And so we review the guidelines, and I want to make sure that I make it clear that our organization is open to everyone. But our focus and who we center are Black voices, and the Black perspective and the Black demographic. But we make sure that people can at least facilitate one event per month, at least one, so that you are establishing consistency in your area. And so, I mean, the process really isn't hard. It isn't hard to start, but it can be challenging to maintain. And
Sure.
for as long as, because I know even if for you to have a show and for you, sometimes it can be challenging. People don't realize that this is hard work. It can.
That's why I got a producer.
Yeah, I mean, and what you find is that yes, it's great to have people in your corner helping you, but even with such and most of us, we're kind of doing this on shoestrings. I mean, this is still volunteer for me, but it takes teamwork, and it takes time, and it takes consistency. And when you're dealing with people just in general, you're going to find that sometimes that can be very, very challenging, to find people who will remain consistent enough to to keep groups going. And this happens in other organizations as well. You have folks who they'll want to start up an affiliate or chapter or what have you, but then something happens where they either can or they can't or they won't do it anymore. And so it's like I said, it isn't starting it, it's maintaining it that becomes the challenge.
Right. And yeah, I mean, funny enough, I've been doing this for close to 3 years now. I've got somewhere in the neighborhood of almost 300 interviews that I've done.
Nice.
And I love doing it because I get to meet people like you, Mandisa, people that I had so much respect for and admiration for what they do, getting in front of a camera and talking about atheism, balls out kind of stuff, right? No holds barred sort of thing. And I said, you know what, I can do this too. And that way, if I did something like this, because the way I started was, I saw people like Seth Anders doing this kind of thing, like talking to people about similar things. I said, yeah, and he's got a great voice. And let me tell you, when I had him on the show, people were like, oh my God, this is like atheist ASMR going on. Yeah. start falling asleep, right?
Really?
Well, not actually.
Well, yeah.
but there's just it's like people are saying these are like a couple of the best voices in doing this right now.
Yes.
So Although I'm used to my voice, so I don't see what they're talking about. And I've heard other people that are like sound better than me, in my opinion. But anyway, but yeah, you're right. I mean, more people need to be doing this. We need to be more of us out there doing something along the lines. And channels are popping up all the time. You got your friendly neighborhood atheist. You've got which he's really cool. And
awesome.
Yeah, he's great. And were you part of his whole anniversary thing that he did?
Yes, actually, I did. I was, and it was interesting because I was right in the middle of another event, and I had
that's right. You were doing it from there.
Yes, I had just got finished speaking, so it was,
timing was good.
Right? Yes, it was. So, I just remember when you said that, when we're influenced and inspired by people who are out there. I remember the first time I saw an episode of the Atheist Experience with Matt.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed. We were so impressed with, his delivery. And I remember getting more involved with the Black atheist circles and learning of that, Sakifu Hutchinson was out there, and Dr. Anthony Penn, and there were others who were active at that time. And so for me, it was just like, wow, I do want to make a contribution to this.
Sure.
What can I do to be a part, of the community and try to encourage more people to get out and to network and just build. That is what I really, really wanted to do. And so if you would have told me that, Black Nonbelievers would have been the leading Black atheist organization at this time, I definitely did not foresee that because again, we were working alongside other entities and other organizations. And so we were just really trying to, get out there in the Atlanta area to build up that community and increase our advocacy and our voices. So
sure.
I mean, again, I remember what that was like for me, just wanting to be involved and maybe doing something a little different, putting a little flavor to it. I don't think there was anything wrong with that, right? So
not at all. The more flavors, the better. Look at Baskin Robbins; they're popular.
That's right. That's right.
Minimum 31 flavors. Those guys. But I mean, and I've seen you many times on the Atheist Experience. Like, come on, right? I mean, I've been on Talk Heathen and Truth Wanted a couple of times, and I've had Matt on the show. Matt and I are friends. I've been to his house and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one of these days, it's a dream of mine to be a co-host of the Atheist Experience. Just to do that, just even once would be so much fun.
It's a very interesting and lovely experience. It is an experience.
Absolutely. You got to do it there at the ACA.
Yes, twice.
Yeah.
In 2018, I was the guest speaker for the ACA's back cruise. And, I actually didn't even realize that I would be taping an episode of AXP that same weekend. And I thought, wow, this is way to maximize the weekend. I'm like, this is awesome. So, but yeah, it was great. I was a little nervous the first time I did it. But yeah, I was glad to have the opportunity to come back in 2019 as well, and then also be on there recently. And that was, it's always great. And I will be back again. So in the future. So look out for that.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of your friendly neighborhood, Ethan's show, I was on at the same time as Aaron Raw. So, and I know Aaron personally too. And,
yes.
And now Ethan wanted to have me and Aaron on his show, just the two of us with him for an episode, because he thought that in that little 15-minute spot that we got, that we had a lot of fun, pretty funny stuff. So he wanted to have us back on at the same time. I was like, really? I'm like, yeah, you guys are great together. I'm like, oh, okay.
I can see that. The long hair probably does it for both of you.
Yeah. We're like biker boys and birds of a feather, we'll say, I guess.
Yes.
Well, we got about a little over 10 minutes left. I like to bring my producer in for the end. I'm going to start doing this a little more often now. Have Mikey in here for the end of the show, because I got a feeling he might have some questions for you as well.
Neil, you can call me T'Challa Ipombe. You can see Warrior Falls behind me. Got me feeling Africanized up in here. I like the energy. I like stuff.
I like your name now, T'Challa Famine.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, if there's one thing about me, if I tell a joke, I'm going all the way in. There is no half measures. Great interview, by the way. I just wanted to know if you would want to speak on. I wrote down cultural pressure to conform in the Black community.
Oh yeah. Do we only have 10 minutes on that? I remember when I was first getting started and as I was coming out as an atheist, re-identifying, I had one of my mentors, one of my former teachers, who was she was very, very Afrocentric, big on Black culture, but she's a big Christian.
Yes.
And I remember as I started speaking out, she actually tried to discourage me.
Oh, really?
Yes, because she was touting the legacy of the Black church and what the church has done for the community and how she knows God has been guiding her and such. And I just thought, wow,
Right.
this is the excuse that many in the Black community give, especially when, we start speaking up about our non-belief. Well, the church has done so much for the community.
Right.
The church has done this, that, and the third. It's like, well, if you really want to go into the history of it,
Yes.
because I remember also thinking growing up, like, why the hell are so many Black folks Christian, knowing that it was the religion used to enslave our ancestors. So
Correct.
I also had that question, but there is just so much, religion is, and Christianity in particular is so interwoven into the fabric of the Black community. It's like you can't escape it.
Right.
Most of, much of the entertainment, there is a lot of that incorporated in there. Much of, you can't be, just like we saw with now Senator Warnock. He touted his, Reverend Raphael Warnock. So,
Right.
there is this tendency to still look to religious leadership as a means of representing the entire Black community, which is completely unfair.
And bullshit.
It is, yeah, really, it really is, and it always has been. And so it really, really does speak to the level of, just and plus, in the Black churches, the music is very entertaining, and
Oh,
so
they be jamming. Oh, they be getting
there's
down.
a whole other level to the culture of now. I personally do not have that extreme, like the full Black church experience, but I am very much aware of it, and how much and how much the music has been influential. So, it's like you just really, really just you can't escape it no matter what, and it is that much harder because it's so tied into the identity of the community.
Right.
I remember a few years ago there was a Black woman who told me that that I had a slave mentality, that she couldn't believe that as a Black woman I had the nerve to identify as an atheist. She equated it to
What?
being a white thing. Yeah. She
Yeah.
actually said that. Said, I can't
Wow.
believe you have the nerve to identify as an atheist in front of these white devils. So it was, and you talk to so many other Black folks who do think that, and because atheism is still so widely represented by white folks, that
Right.
it's a thing that Black people don't do, and if you do it, then you're trying to be like them. But
You must be trying to please somebody.
exactly, that you are negating the Black experience, you are negating your Black identity, and this is something that that many have troubles. They have trouble dealing with. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that's why they just stay silent, or they just kind of definitely go along with the flow, because and we're still very much surrounded by religious folks in our community. But
Yeah.
again, now that the number of the religiously unaffiliated is 21%, which is about on par as to what has historically been the case within the Black community. But now there is more of an awareness that is, but it's still kind of like, So kind of chipping away. It's still chipping away at that. And our numbers are still smaller in comparison. And I think it's largely because people might be definitely afraid of openly identifying.
Oh, I
Yeah.
guarantee you that's part of the reason.
That because like you said, it is so ingrained in Black culture. Like your American Blackness. So you Baptist?
Right.
You gotta be Baptist. Are you Baptist or you Southern Baptist? Are you Kojic? You from the Kojic churches? You know what I mean? Like it was always or AME. It's so attached to you. And then like the other thing I wanted to throw in, because I know we're running out of time, is for me, especially in Black History Month, you check out all these leaders from the past, and it's like, damn, I wonder how much more shit they could have gotten done if they weren't so religious. Because every Black civil rights leader was, they would organize at the church, and they're all religious. And it's like, I don't like religious stuff, but this was the only thing available at the time. You know what I mean?
And, I also, I tend to argue about the church being such a safe space, considering that, one of the churches in Alabama was bombed with the 4 little girls, in Birmingham, right after the March on
I've been there.
Washington. I mean, it is a very, very, it is a very, very tragic, time. That was a very, very tragic point in history. And, what people tend to forget about the foundations of Black History Month is that it is rooted in free thought. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who founded Negro History Week, also challenged the institution of the church. So when I mentioned the historical presence of Black humanists and free thinkers, that is often obscured and swept under the rug in favor of the religious, leaders that are often more upheld within the Black community. Not to say that they shouldn't be, but also our legacy needs to be upheld.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. Drink my green cup to that.
The one that disappears, the predator cloaking.
Until I get sponsorship money. Sorry, Red Bull. I mean, drink.
I mean, random energy drink.
Carbonated beverage.
Well, if I see wings start popping up behind you, I'm going to get a little. I know exactly what you're drinking. Well, Mandisa, we are closing in on the hour, and you've agreed. You'll jump in for a little bit, I guess, for the after party, I guess, because I know that there's some folks that definitely want to come in and fangirl all over you. So,
that still seems so weird if you don't see.
I know. It does. I'm one of those because I've been a big fan of what
you're a fangirl, Neil. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's the hair.
Hey, that's totally fine. You're a
sounds like you're judging right now. That's what it sounds like.
Right? Yeah.
I was walking. Sorry, real quick. I was actually walking down the street in the city that I used to live in, and some dudes came up behind me and whistled when I turned around. Oh, it's a dude. So, yeah, I'm a dude. Yeah. But thanks. You like my butt? Cool. Anyway, so I was younger then. It looked a lot better, I guess. But that wasn't coins, Mikey. That was the other phone.
I heard coins.
Oh, maybe it was in there. I have a phone that does the Mario coin sound, so we turned it into a drinking game. Every time the coin sound happens, we got to drink. So,
wow.
yeah. Sometimes it gets a little carried away.
Have to have you put that on silent for a little while, man. I got to work tomorrow.
Yeah. So do I, and I get up at 4 in the morning. So, but. Mandisa, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you. Thank y'all both so much for having me.
And happy anniversary.
Thank you.
For the Black Nonbelievers 10th anniversary, established in 2011, like it says down there in the corner over there.
Yes. And we just completed our 10th anniversary celebration, although we'll be celebrating all year. But we just had the anniversary event last month in New Orleans, and also it was streamed online. And so, awesome. Yes, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, was that what you were doing when you were on Ethan's show? Were you doing a little speaking about that at that time?
Well, no, I did another presentation, even though I did discuss our 10th anniversary, a bit. Okay. But that was in Macon with the Skeptics of Middle Georgia. That was also a great event. But yeah, that was earlier this month. That was February 4th and the 5th. That was the Reason Summit that took place there. So, but yeah, no, our event was from January 15th through the 17th. That was MLK weekend in New Orleans that we had the 10th anniversary.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for everything that you do as well, for the community, for all the Black Nonbelievers out there. And this is, if you guys hadn't heard about this organization, now you have. And I'm sure you've already heard of the organization because Mandisa is pretty much known anywhere you go, so, at least in this community. Oh, my phone thinks I'm talking to it. I didn't even think I said anything that sounded anything at all like "Hey Google," so I'm not sure. Oh, there it goes again. So I should probably not say that. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. We are going to do an after party, and I already know some of you want to come in and say hi to Mandisa. So there is a link to the after party in the description box below. Also, I want to give a big shout out to all my amazing patrons. It's because of you guys that the show keeps going and improving. And what's my next one? I for some reason, I'm having issues. Oh, that's right. Very soon, Randolph, who's the president of Canadian Atheists, and I'm the community advocate for the same organization. We're starting up our own call-in show called True North Talk. So head over to the YouTube channel True North Talk and give us a sub there. You can also go to www.truenorthtalk.ca and there'll be a link to the channel there. Yes, if you check out IQ, he put Mandisa's link tree in the chat there for you guys so you can check out. But I have lots of her links down below in the description as well. And come and watch myself and some of the other great hosts like Cynthia McDonald, who's in the chat, for the relaunch Nonprofits, which airs at 3 p.m. Central Sunday between Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. And you'll see me on there. You'll see Jenna Miu. You'll see Thomas. You'll see Jim Barrows. You'll see Johnny Angel. You'll see Cynthia. You'll see many, many more. And Mikey was actually a guest on our show, and we'll probably be back for another one. Mm-hmm. And the last Saturday of every month, myself, my very good friend Andy, who has the channel called Laughing in Disbelief because he's a comedian. We do a little show at 2 p.m. Pacific time on the last Saturday of every month with Seamus called Atheist Drinking Out Loud, where we have a few beers and we make fun of articles that we see in the news or people in general that deserve it. It's always a lot of fun. We usually go for a couple hours, and then, of course, I'm already half cut by the time my Saturday show runs. So Saturday shows are very entertaining, especially the ones at the end of the month.
Yes, those are a lot of fun, they call it.
And don't forget, my wonderful producer here does a show called The Bin Podcast. So you can find that also on YouTube and check that out as well. Mikey, thanks for everything you do for me, my friend. Always a pleasure. I'm glad we hooked up and you're now part of the team. And Mandisa, once again, well, you know what I mean. Mandisa, thank you very much for being the guest of honor for today. And we'll chat a little more in the after party.
Absolutely. Thank you all once again.
No problem. And like I always say at the end of these shows, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.